Well, thank you so much, Samir. It's an absolute pleasure. I think I'm very excited to actually host Patsy today. Thank you all for joining in and listening in today. I think I must add that, this conversation has been something which has been on in minds of many customers of mine over the last 2 3 years, and I'm extremely thrilled to have Patsy with me today. I think Patsy and I go 15 years ago. Over the last 15 years, I've worked with Patsy, has supported Patsy, and Patsy at the same time has visited to India in many different formats and helping large conglomerates setting up their shop here in India and across the globe. So it's an honor, it's a pleasure to have Patsy in today. So Patsy, I'm going to possibly just go straight in, because I think the amount of information and experience that you have had, I think the listeners would be keen to hear that. So, Patsy, you've been leading location strategies for a large set of conglomerates, MNCs, Fortune 500 companies for more than 2 decades now. And I think every time I've met you, the conversations have been around uh, what are you looking at setting up? What are the key triggers of setting up in a place like India or in other countries as well? How has those conversations changed post COVID? Does the cost angle come again nowadays, or is it now about talent? Is it about politics? It is about how have conversation changed post COVID, Patsy? And
Yeah.
I'm really looking forward to talking to you on this topic.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think Vijay, actually already before COVID, we noted a shift in the conversations of our clients with less focus on cost savings, on labor arbitrage only. And that was already in the whole digitization and automation agenda, I think, that was already happening. And so the key focus of many of our conversations, and also the reasons why you and I met so many times in the past years, was really on talent. Where can you find the right kind of talent? Where is the suitable set of skills that you need to access? Where can you scale and where can you grow if you need to expand? How flexible are these markets in terms of ramping up and down if that is needed? And also how sustainable are markets? Because we all know there's a war for talent, competition is huge. So how do you manage attrition? So those things are really top of the mind of our investors. And then recently we saw new topics as well coming up, like cultural fit or things like diversity and inclusion, are also quite new, which already before COVID started to make the whole location selection process more complex. And then, of course, came COVID, which put another layer of complexity to it all. And again, moving further away again from cost saving potential only and putting more emphasis on risks. How can we anticipate risk, not just mitigate risk, but anticipate risk? How can we try to foresee what kind of disruption might be around the corner? How do we build in resiliency in our footprint, in our supply chain? And so those really became the core questions of our clients. Not so much efficiency, but very much how do we build in that resiliency, so that we have a footprint and an operating model that it can cope with disruption if that just occurs to us.
Interesting, because I do recall in many of our conversations together, your conversations with your end customer would always be around what would be the right hierarchy, what would be the right structure, at what compensation levels do these guys come in, and it's always been focused on talent. And but post COVID, do you see that the conversations are around can we get talent rather than assuming that talent exists?
Can we get talent and can we keep it? It's really that. Can we attract them? Can we retain them? That is really the core focus. Because with COVID, a lot of employees have also started thinking about, what's next for them? So yeah, definitely, it's really not just is the talent there, but how do we as an employer manage to get them, attract them to us, and provide them with an employee value proposition, really.
Well, I was meeting a GCC client of mine recently, and he was telling me that honestly, he didn't care where the candidate came from or the employee came from, as long as they knew how to do the job. And that brings me to my next question to you, Patsy. I think, how do you see the GCC framework with all this hybrid workforce, work from home? Do you see organizations further decentralizing captives, like having smaller formats of captives, bigger formats of captives? How does when you advise customers on which location, I'm assuming you also keep in mind how big a captive they could keep, because You have companies in India that have thousands of people in the capital, and you have companies in India that have just a few hundreds.
Yeah.
So the decentralization of GCCs happening.
I think it's not just a hybrid way of working, but also, again, already before, the step before, with COVID and the whole focus on resiliency. Resiliency also means that companies want to actually spread the risk and not just having all their eggs in one big basket in the large centers in India or in the Philippines that you were referring to, but also sometimes having smaller hubs, sometimes coming closer to markets where there's better access to languages, where there's another cultural fit, like for instance, closer to Western markets. We've also seen smaller centers now set up in Latin America, which is becoming a key competitor to India. So definitely, I think it's also decentralization in the context of that business continuity planning. That's definitely one thing. But then, of course, and you're referring to hybrid ways of working. Yes, I do think that might have played a role in a little bit of a different type of decentralization, because indeed, if people don't have to come to the office every day, but just
Right.
2 or 3 days a week, you can imagine that they might be willing to travel in for a little bit longer on those couple of days that they come in. And so you could think about labor drawing areas actually becoming a bit larger. The radius around the city from where you can bring in people becomes larger because of that, because people don't have to travel in every day. And that maybe indeed creates opportunities for cities that were not necessarily on the map before to now position themselves for satellites or for more decentralized hubs for smaller scale setups. So as in addition to where concentrations already were happening in tier one cities in the past.
So how important does maturity of a country come into play? Because in these times when it's uncertain and talent is there everywhere, but volumes change, uh, do companies post COVID prefer countries where talent is there and they are mature, as in they understand how GCCs work, or are companies still trying out new locations post COVID?
I think it's again to do with that whole risk concept that I referred to earlier. I have the feeling companies are a little bit more reluctant to be a real pioneer in new destinations. And we've seen, I noted that the list of exotic locations they're trying to explore is diminishing. And because they're indeed looking for more mature destinations, that's maybe to do with risks, but maybe it's also to do with the kind of skills that they need. Because we also have seen that there's more focus on higher end processes that they need. And so you need to be in locations where that maturity is already there. So locations that have proven to be successful for similar types of operations rather than places where nobody's gone before. So that's definitely a tendency that we've seen
In
as
fact,
well.
I do strongly believe that one of the reasons why the talent war escalated in India was because of that very reason, is that everyone came to India targeting the same set of resources at the same time, and you resulted in people hiring from each other, and it just went into a mad rush of an employee-led behavior than an employer-led behavior. And but for organizations that are looking at expanding, let's say you have a captive or you have a GCC that's looking at expanding, or you have a company that's looking at expanding, and there is a need for digital talent, etc. What are the challenges that you foresee for these companies? If you were to today consult with them and tell them, and they say, okay, we know these countries have the talent, we know these countries have the maturity, these countries know what they're doing, but what are the challenges generally that you come across, as in, or advices that you give across?
The challenge, Vijay, I think you pointed out yourself just there, and you referred to the war for talent. The
Mhm.
other day, I just heard a very interesting quote, and it said, "The war for talent is over, but the talent has won." And that, I think, summarizes it really quite nicely, because that's exactly what it is. This has really become an employee market. We've seen a double-digit salary inflation, attrition of 20 plus. So a lifetime career with one company is just not happening anymore these days. There are a few exceptions, just such as myself, but I think that that's really quite rare. So I think that is the biggest challenge for an employer, to really position themselves on the map. How do you attract people where there's such a competition going around? And that is, I think, the key advice that I would give to companies if they want to expand or set up in new operations, to really try and grasp the dynamics of those operating environments in which they want to operate, and to really try and understand the employee market. What are the motivations of the workforce, and specifically the next gen workforce, and the millennials, as we often call them? What is
Right.
driving them? What gets them up in the morning? What are their career aspirations? And what is important for them? And really try to accommodate that. And on that basis, yeah, gain their trust, gain positive brand awareness, and become positioned on the map as employers where they want to work and potentially stay also for quite a while. So that I think is a key advice, yeah, to make it work in this war for talent that we
It's like,
all are facing.
it's a client once told me that, and he was representing a huge Fortune 500 brand, and he told me that the candidates today or the employees today are brand agnostic. He said there's a brand in every corner, and employees do, and what differentiates an organization to another is the way they build their culture and the way they
Mhm.
develop talent and help them grow. I think today's millennials today have spent a lot of effort in upskilling themselves, learning, but they're also a function of a 2 minute TikTok video. So their attention span also is that low. So I think
Mhm.
it is very interesting to hear you say that it's about not just about attracting and retaining those talent, but just a question around that. You have a company that's looking at expanding its GCC footprint in a location which is not their headquarters. Then you have a set of employees that are hybrid, that are not in office every day. So when you have conversations with your clients, or when you have conversations internally, uh, how open are customers today in accepting, even post COVID, that they are okay with the hybrid reality that people can work from home, etc. Because that becomes is becoming a very integral uh, point for employees to join today.
It's a selling point. I think hybrid work is there to stay. Whether we want it or not as a company, it's there to stay. But it's all about finding the right balance, I think. I think employees that have come into new companies in the last 2 years during COVID, fully remote work, that's not ideal either. So you really want to find a good mix. Is it 2 days a week? Is it 3 days a week? But finding the right balance, and specifically at the beginning, I think it's very important for a company as well, because how otherwise do you build a company culture? Huh? How do you build a liaison with your employees? And you have to have a place where people can exchange, where they can come in and innovate, share knowledge, meet each other, do fun things. And if they do the bulk of the work from home, that is fine, because I do think that is indeed is a selling point, because a lot of people want to work partly from home, and that's something that is there to stay. But you have to have a good mix. And the other end of the equation, the full virtual model, I'm not a strong believer of that. I would be out of work if location would no longer matter. But also, again, from that whole company culture perspective, I think you do have to have a place where you can go and meet your colleagues and have that sense of belonging. Otherwise, I think the fatigue will bump in quite quickly, I would say.
In fact, we're seeing, and you're absolutely right. In fact, we're seeing a very interesting transformation happening even at the employee mix. So if you look at a lot of GCCs that are there in India today, and I'm a huge service provider in all these areas, that you see earlier a good percentage of employees were core to the organization. And over the last 2 years, because of the war for talent and nicheness of the requirement as such, what you've seen is organization hierarchies have changed. You've seen now a percentage of people that are full-time employees of the organization. You have a percentage of employees that are contract employees to the organization. And now you're seeing a lot of employees that are gig players that work based on tasks or based on outcomes. And today an entire organization is now swelling into three different types of arrangements between the employer and the employee, which then allows these companies to be more what do you call it, more flexible. So
Flexibility. Yeah. Mhm.
downturn, they can quickly ramp down on a few areas. If there's an upturn, they can ramp up. So I think mixes are changing, and do you see that across the world?
Yeah, exactly. A lot of our clients are doing the same kind of exercises. And what do we still have to do in house? Some things are really difficult to get in house, and indeed, you sometimes cannot afford to take the time to train people up to the level that you need. So then, indeed, you have to look for different ways. Do I make it or do I buy it? That's a bit of a question, and a lot of our companies are facing that as well, and we're helping them with that as well. So parts of IBM can help with that as well. So what do you really need to have in house, and where are there better sources where the skill is more easily available if needed?
Awesome. So just one thought around that is that when you talk to your clients today versus all the years that you've been doing this role, is it now completely digital tech requirements that are coming, or do you still see requirements coming for analytics and BPOs and voice in a market like India? What kind of requests are coming in your plate compared to, let's say, a few years ago? Has it changed or is it still the same?
Definitely changed. Yeah, it's still a diverse mix, as you still have a set of the more traditional processes, definitely, but very clearly it's definitely moving up higher end, higher knowledge based, and a lot of focus on IT, on digital services. So you see a lot of demand for data analytics, for cybersecurity, very specific software skills. Agile ways of working is really top on the agenda as well, and you see demand for skills that actually just a couple of years ago did not even exist, and which
Right.
now are in very high demand and which are extremely scarce, not just in India, but across the world. And things like AI, of course, but also intelligent automation, virtual reality, IoT, cloud, all of that. And so there's a lot of companies looking for that. But of course, the size of the market is still expanding exponentially, but it's still way too small for the demand that we see here. So that's definitely something to work on, I would say, in building those skills over time to accommodate that need that is there.
Just a market like India, which has just crossed close to 5 million folks in tech workforce, looking at doubling up in the next few years. I think there's a huge focus on building the ecosystem around universities and upskilling programs and getting people ready, because technology, what was niche yesterday is vanilla today, and just because of the sheer demand, a vanilla skill is becoming niche because there are not too many people available in those skills anymore. So I think it's quite an amazing journey how employers and employees both alongside are expanding and growing, but at the same time the challenge is just enormously catching up in terms of keeping up and being relevant. And so, just a final point before we close this conversation, Patsy, is that your advice to GCC employers and your advice to companies that operate and expand, etc., in terms of ensuring, what would be the top two, three things from your perspective to ensure that workplace and talent strategies are right or are in place? I know it's a crystal ball question. There's no right answer or a wrong answer, but just your thoughts.
I think we've touched upon a lot of points already, yeah, to really grasp what is important, what is driving the workforce. But you just touched upon a very interesting other point. At the universities, work with them as well, because they're really at the basis of where your talent will be coming in. So very early on, as an employer, already work with them to indicate what kind of skills you need, and that of course takes time. Eh? You'll have to go through the whole curriculum to actually get your skills, but I think that is very important to build the skills, but also once again to build your brand recognition in the market. So you will be perhaps on the minds of employees when they come in, because that really matters, I think, because there's so much opportunity, so much choice. So be recognized as an employer that can make a difference, where your employee value proposition is key. I think that is really will help you not just attract but also keep your talent that you've heavily invested in. Really.
Brilliant. I think thank you so much, Patsy. You're always a pleasure to talk to. I think it's been 15 years, but I still, every time that I speak to you, there's always something that I learn new. I think we hope to get you back to Bangalore soon. It's been a while since you've visited.
Would
So,
be great. Yeah.
and thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it. And looking forward to catching up in the future.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Vijay.
Thank you so much.